All right. 2 Kings chapters 18, 19, and 20. Well, thanks again. Welcome back to another episode of Papa John's Scripture Notes. These 3 chapters of 2 Kings, we're going to get through these quickly, running a little behind. The ranch has been very busy, and Papa John is playing catch up. Chapter 18 details the spiritual revival of the nation of Judah under King Hezekiah, one of Papa John's favorites. We're going to get straight into this because there's a siege that I want to get to quickly as the Assyrians attacked Jerusalem, and King Sennacherib is the anglicized way of pronouncing it, or in Hebrew, Sancheriv. Anyway, Hezekiah has been praised for his radical obedience to God, unlike his father Ahaz, which is directly contrasted with the terrifying threat and psychological warfare which the Assyrian army was famous for. And so, welcome to Hezekiah's righteous reign, one of Papa John's favorites. The companion verses for chapter 18 it would include 19 and 20, and then 2 Chronicles 32 and Isaiah 36. Verse 2, let's just skip to verse 2. 20 and 5 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was also Avi, and the daughter of Zechariah, or Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. No, we're going to put the name back in, restore the name in the sight of Jehovah, according to that all that David, his father, did. Now, David's not his direct father. He's a descendant of David. So all the promised prophecies and blessings associated with that lineage is basically documenting the fact that he's from that tribe. Verse 4, this will blow your mind. He removed the high places, break the images, and cut down the groves. That's great because that's all the pagan, the idolatry of Israel as they're worshiping foreign gods, man-made gods of wood and stone. But this blows Papa John's mind. And break in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. What? Are you kidding me? Moses? How many generations ago was that? As they wander, die in the wilderness between Egypt and Mount Sinai. This is generations. Who held on to that? And why is he destroying that along with all the other images of idolatry? For unto those, the verse says, unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it. And he called it Nuhashtan. So he's recognizing that this has been kind of it's evolved into an adultery type idol, and he destroys it generations after it was raised in the wilderness. And anyone that would look upon it, even if they were bitten by the serpents, would live. And some refused. Isn't that amazing? But verse 5, he trusted in Jehovah, Elohim of Israel, and that's what King Hezekiah is known for. So that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, of Yehudah, nor any that were before him. For he clave to Jehovah and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments which Jehovah commanded Moses. So because Hezekiah trusts and obeys God, he prospers, successfully repels against the oppressive Assyrian Empire, but not for long. Let's just skip the rest of that footnote. Here we are looking at an image of King Hezekiah looking over the city wall at a siege. The Assyrians are attacking. Why? Well, verse 7 explains why. And and Jehovah was with him, and he prospered whithersoever he went forth. And then I bolded and underlined, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and served him not. What does that mean? Well, the previous kings had an alliance with Syria, and they paid their portion. They had money that they would pay, and he refused to pay it. And this was partly protection money. It was a sum due, and he is trying to follow God's law, which says, "Be my people, I'll be your God." Keep the covenant made at Mount Sinai. Follow the holiness code of Leviticus. Don't go into alliances. Don't be a confederate with other nations. For if you're my people, not only will I provide for you, I will protect you. So he's doing what's right in the eyes of the law, God's law, the Torah, but the Assyrians don't look at it that way. He didn't pay his tribute money. So verse 8 just mentions he had another battle with the Philistines, even unto Gaza, and he was successful there. But I'm going to skip and let's get into verse 13. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Yehuda, and took them. So as he's working his way to Jerusalem, he's attacking every settlement and taking them by force. Remarkably powerful army. And so imagine King Hezekiah on the city wall looking out and seeing the superpower of the day. What kind of reaction would you have? This is fear being instilled within the king and his people. They're trying to do what's right. How many times do we have that experience in our lives? Ask yourself. I tried to do what's right, and suddenly life got hard. There seems to be some resistance to following God in this fallen sphere that we live in under the conditions that exist. Verse 14, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Okay, so he's admitting I should have paid. Okay, return from me, meaning retreat. Don't continue. That which thou putteth on me, I will bear. So I'll pay the tribute money, whatever it is. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. I'm not sure exactly how much that is, but I'm sure, quite a large sum. But look at, he's staring at the superpower of the age coming his direction. Papa John identifies with King Hezekiah's humanity in the fact that he has faith, but he's struggling in this moment, and he's just buying peace at all cost. And this is crazy. Verse 15, and Hezekiah, who we just were told was one of the righteous kings, gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord, in the house of Jehovah, from the temple, and the treasures of the king's house. So he strips, verse 16, at the time did Hezekiah, he even cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of Jehovah. Oh, that's not a good choice. And from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Yehuda, had overlaid, and gave it into the king of Assyria. So he emptied the king's house, the temple house, and even stripped off the pillars and the door, gold. And so silver and gold and precious things were paid as tribute money, and the Assyrians took it, but they don't stop. The siege and the attack on the city continues. A quick footnote, now we see the Assyrian blasphemy and siege begin. Now I'm going to help us read this chapter in a way that we recognize the blasphemy, just like King Hezekiah. And Papa John is leading up to the famous prayer of Hezekiah. I hope we can learn from Hezekiah some ways and methods of praying to the true and living God that are effective. You're going to see how effective by the time we get through these chapters. So Sennacherib breaks the truce and sends his chief field commander, Rabshakeh, alongside a massive army to Jerusalem. And Rabshakeh stands near the city walls and taunts Hezekiah's officers. He's mocking their military weakness and their reliance on Egypt. So let's get straight into this. I'm going to skip to verse 19. And Rabshakeh said unto them, Speak ye now to Hezekiah, thus saith the king of Assyria, What confidence is this wherein thou trusteth? Thou sayest, but they are but vain words. Our scribe who wrote this down for us, recorded this chapter in parentheses, wants us to know these are vain words. And that's helpful. Again, we're trying to get to past the ink on the page of the English Bible in this case, the King James Bible, because we want to know what's being said a little closer to the original history, language, and context. So there's a cheat sheet type note that says they were vain words. So what I'm about to read, Papa John, I want you to just understand this is the enemy, the spokesman for the king, talking smack talk. He's trash talking against Israel, ancient Israel, and King Hezekiah. He says, thus, or let's see, I have counsel, verse 20. I have counsel and strength for the war. Oh, well, thank you very much. Now, on whom dost thou trust, or do you trust, that thou rebellest against me? Now, behold, thou trustest upon the staff of this bruised reed. Well, that's an insult. Even upon Egypt. Oh, he's attacking Pharaoh. We thought Pharaoh was mighty. Well, the Assyrians make Pharaoh look weak. He's just like a bruised reed. And the verse continues, on which if a man lean, if he will it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, unto all that trust on him. So he's saying, you've made an alliance with a weak kingdom. Verse 22, but if ye say unto me, we trust in Jehovah. Wait, he's invoking the name. This is a wicked Assyrian empire spokesman. He's the empire of death, the superpower of the age. And he's saying, you say we trust in Jehovah our Elohim? Is not that he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and hath said to Judah and Jerusalem, ye shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? So he knows what's going on in their country. They've been worshiping for generations in the high places and altars and worshiping the gods of the surrounding, Gentile nations. And he's saying, you trust in God, but you're changing the way you worship. He doesn't understand they're repenting and becoming more righteous and aligned with God and the holiness code and the covenant made at Mount Sinai. But he sees an opportunity to attack them for what they're doing. Again, isn't that just like in our life when we recommit to do better? And God, I know better, I'm going to do better. And we make goals, spiritual goals of study and prayer and worship. And the world says, is not that, and it's just similar how we have similar challenges, although not from a superpower, right? Verse 23, now therefore I pray thee, he continues, give pledges to my Lord. Now, this is no capital letters. This is basically a reference to his master, the king of Assyria. So give pledges to my Adonai, the king of Assyria, and I will deliver thee 2,000 horses. Well, that's very generous. And here comes the if and the insult. If thou be able on thy part to set riders upon them. Okay, he's offering a bribe and gifts, and insulting is the follow-up in the same sentence. In verse 24, how then wilt thou turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants and put thy trust on Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? So you have your military, and then Egypt's going to bring in the big guns, the tanks, the chariots is what they would be in their day, and the trained horsemen. And then there's this big, bright red line. Why did Papa John put that there? Because beginning in verse 25, the blasphemy begins. Listen to how this spokesman for the enemy, for the Assyrians, invokes the name of God in improper, unholy ways. Am I now come up without Jehovah against this place to destroy it? So I'm not even following any names God. He continues, Yehovah said to me, you think this is true? He spoke to this guy, really? Yehovah said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. This is smack talk at a high level. In an effort to terrify the Jewish citizens on the wall, Rabshakeh yells in the Hebrew language rather than the diplomatic Aramaic language. He boastfully claims that no gods have ever saved any nation from Assyria when they attack, and tells the people not to trust in Hezekiah or the Lord. But because it's all capitals, he actually spoke the name. He knows the name of their God. Verse 26 then says, this is an interruption in the dialogue. These next two verses, as the spokesman for the Assyrians is speaking to the Jews in their own language, he's interrupted by Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shevnu, and Rabshakeh. They say to him, "Speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it. And talk not with us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people that are on the wall." And here's his response. Rav Kashe says, "Hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak these words?" He's like, "I'm not talking to you. Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall, that they may hear? I'm sorry, that they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you?" Okay. All right. Now we're getting down and dirty. This smack talk, this trash talking amongst themselves. He's interacting with his soldiers, his armies. And then, verse 28, he goes back to the Jews. Then Rav Shakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language, and spake, saying, "Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in Jehovah, saying, Jehovah will surely deliver us, and this city shall not be delivered unto the hand of the king of Assyria. Hearken not to Hezekiah." This is psychological warfare. Can you see what's going on here? And don't you feel like we wake up every morning, look at our phones, and we get our talking points from culture of what we need to talk about and debate about today, instead of just serving God, finding unity and love for our fellow man? This is psychological warfare we're reading about, but we experience this every day in Papa John's, in my experience. And that's why I don't do a lot of that on, I walked away from Facebook. Um, I never did Instagram or anything. I have this little Papa John Scripture Notes project on YouTube. And it's amazing how the algorithms now know me and feed me. We live in the information age, and it's amazing what I'm learning that no previous age has ever had at their fingertips, really, literally. And my mother, she's 90 years old, listens to conference talks and inspiring uh, episodes as she works in her flower garden every day. It's amazing if we choose what's available to us. But back to this, hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me by a present. What, we just gave you all that gold and silver, even from the king's palace and the temple. Make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, really, I'm not sure. And then eat ye every man of his own vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one the waters of his cistern. And then here's the gotcha, until I come. So he's promising peace and prosperity. We've been warned about when someone offers us peace and prosperity, we should never. That's actually a part of the signs of the times leading up to the second coming, when they promise agreements and alliances between nations, and they promise what? Peace and prosperity. Verse 32, though, the truth comes out. He exposes his true colors. Until I come and take you away to a land like your own land. He makes it sound really good, doesn't he? A land of corn. Well, that was the anglicized interpretation. Grain is what the Hebrew would have said. A land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of oil, olive. That's interesting. Old English for sure, right there. And of honey, that ye may live and not die, and hearken not unto Hezekiah, when he persuadeth you, saying, Jehovah will deliver us. This is, again, psychological wherefore. And now he's going to talk about the other nations they've conquered and their gods. Hath any of the Elohims of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? And the answer is no. Where are the Elohims of Hamath? And he names all these towns, Arpah and Sepharvaim and Hanu and Ivah. I can't say that anyway. Have they delivered Samaria out of mine hand? Who are they among all the Elohims of the countries that have delivered their country out of mine hand, that Jehovah should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand? And if you research archaeology, they have records of the Assyrians and all their conquers and conquest. What's interesting is this one battle is not listed, because this was nothing to brag about by the time we get into this chapter. But right now it's pretty ominous, right? I hope you would agree, between the psychological warfare and the siege around the city, how's this going to play out? It's looking pretty ominous. So, a short footnote to come up for breath. Hezekiah had wisely instructed his people not to answer Rabshakeh's taunts. And this chapter concludes with Hezekiah's officials returning to the king with their clothes torn in mourning and distress, setting the stage for chapter 19. But the verse right here, I love, verse 36. After all the psychological warfare, the trash talking, this talking smack, insults and promises, vain promises, verse 36, but the people held their peace and answered him not a word. For the king's commandment was, saying, answer him not. And you know what? Sometimes silence is the best response. In life, when you are being mocked, ridiculed, either online or in person, sometimes the high ground is to walk away. Don't come down to their level. Now, chapter 18, what did we learn from chapter 18? Radical trust over fear. Hezekiah is remembered as one of the most faithful kings in Judah's history because he trusted in the Lord, in Jehovah. When the Assyrian army threatened Jerusalem, he didn't panic. Instead, he demonstrated that true faith relies on God when facing impossible odds. However, we read about his moment of weakness when he paid the tribute money, and you saw how well that worked out for him. The destruction of idols. This is an active faith of trying to do what's right. He's not just ignoring the idolatry in his nation. As the king, he's destroying the idols. Hezekiah took bold action to rid the land of false worship. He went so far as to destroy the bronze serpent made by Moses. Again, that blows my mind that that was still being, generations later, still a thing. It still existed. And why did he destroy it? Because the people had turned it into an idol. This teaches us that even good things or past spiritual experiences may be discarded if they become a substitute for God. You know, you hear Papa John talk a lot about my moment of truth when I unexpectedly felt the presence of God the Father. Didn't even know that was a thing. Didn't know that was possible. That was in May of 2017. That's 9 years ago. And if that was the only time I'd felt God's presence and that's all I talked about, it'd be similar to a missionary that goes out on a mission and he, you know, 20 years later, he's talking about his glory days on his mission. That's an interesting concept. But I promise you, when I talk in past tense about that moment, it's out of reverence and it's glory for God, because the indwelling of his spirit has not left me since that moment up at my sister's cabin in May of 2017. Anyway, but it's good to be aware. You know, when's the last time you heard the Spirit of God? Have you heard it before? Can you hear it now? Can you say so now? That's a beautiful, powerful scripture. Worldly, two more things, and then we'll move on to chapter 19. Worldly wealth cannot buy peace. Wow, he found that out, didn't he? When the Assyrian king Sennacherib first attacked, Hezekiah gave in to fear and attempted to buy him off using silver and gold from the temple and the palace. This highlights that appeasing worldly threats with worldly solutions ultimately fails. And I've seen that within my life over and over. And last thing is standing firm against mockery. Have some thick skin. Not a hard heart, but just some thick skin. The Assyrian official fiercely mocked Hezekiah and ridiculed God's ability to save the people. The people remained silent under Hezekiah's command, his wise command, teaching us to maintain composure and lean on God when our faith is publicly ridiculed. What good life lessons. Thank you to chapter 18. Now we're going to we're moving on to chapter 19. A quick introduction. Actually, no, I'm going to just get in. Verse 1, and it came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it that he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth. And where did he go? He went into the house of Jehovah. He goes to the temple himself. He's ripped his clothes. He recognizes the dire situation they're in. And who is he turning to? Well, he's in the house of Jehovah. And I have a picture here of him rending his clothes and kneeling in prayer. And then I have a picture of holiness to the Lord, the house of the Lord. And if you've never noticed, and I'm speaking to my LDS family members and friends, if you're in the Protestant or Catholic faith, I have a Jehovah's Witness friend. just understand we have temples in the restored gospel all over the world, and every one of them has this saying, usually in gold letter, engraved in stone, holiness to the Lord, the house of the Lord. And notice, are those all capital letters? Ah, this is the same God King Hezekiah is approaching, written in all capitals. I love that. And if you're an LDS member and you've never noticed that, the all capitals, now you know where they get it from. Verse 2, and he sent Eliakim, which was over the household, and Shevnu, the scribe, and the elders of the priests covered with sackcloth to who? To Isaiah. Hey, this is our first introduction to Isaiah. He's a contemporary of King Hezekiah. And we're getting close to the time of the prophet Lehi, who in the restored gospel, we believe leaves Jerusalem, ends up in the Americas. And we have that record known as the Book of Mormon but this is we're getting into that timeline. Verse 3, and they said unto him, so they go to Isaiah, these people that I just named, that I struggle with how to pronounce their names, and they say, thus saith Hezekiah. And I'm sure this is not the first time the king has consulted with the prophet. So he's at the temple and he sends them to the prophet and says, this is a day of trouble and of rebuke and blasphemy. And remember the red line that the Assyrian spokesman crossed, and he started not just trash talking and not just talking smack, not just hurling insults. He's invoking the name in unholy ways. That's blasphemy. So again, this is a day of trouble and of rebuke and blasphemy. And then I have in burnt orange this interesting phrase, for the children are come to the birth, and there's not strength to bring forth. Ooh, any mother who's born a child, and my oldest daughter, Danielle, lost a child right at birth. She had a stillborn. For the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. This gets personal for some of us. What's King Hezekiah talking about as he tells these men to take this message to the prophet? His nation is trying to become born again, rebirth into the truth and light and the covenant, to keep the holiness code, the happiness code, to allow God. We'll be your people. You'll be our God. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to pull it off. This is very personal. And the end times that we live in today, Papa John just wants to remind you, as we watch the world spiral out of control, it seems, just remember God's totally in control. He's not reacting. He's not overreacting. He is in control. We may not know it, but he is. And the point Papa John wants to make is oftentimes we hear that the end times will be like a woman in travail. What's a woman in travail? It's a woman who's pregnant. She's expecting, and she's getting closer to a date that's unknown, a date that she doesn't know the day or the hour. But pregnancy, as you get closer, you have labor pains, and they increase in frequency and intensity until the unknown moment becomes known. And we're watching the signs of the times as the turmoil of the world spirals out of control. Doesn't it feel like the labor pains, the travails, like a woman in birth? We're seeing these events, these prophetic events, increase in frequency and intensity. But there's the danger the king's concerned about. There is not strength to bring forth. Is this not a moment to cry out to God? Well, he does. Verse 4, it may be Yehovah thy Elohim will hear all the words of Rav Shakeh, whom the king of Assyria his master hath sent to reproach the living Elohim, and will reprove the words which Yehovah thy Elohim hath heard. Wherefore lift up thine prayer for the remnant that are left. That was the message from the king, King Hezekiah, to Isaiah. Pray, and this is why. He listed out. Verse 5, so the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. Okay, so I'm sorry, just like the Bible often does, it repeats so much so. So that was the instruction from King Hezekiah. So now they're in the presence of Isaiah. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, and Isaiah said to them, his response is, thus shall ye say to your master, thus saith Jehovah, be not afraid of the words which thou hast heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me? In fact, God owns it. He just says, they blasphemed me. And yeah, they insulted you. But here we go. Behold, I will send a blast upon him. Who? The king of Assyria. And he shall hear a rumor and shall return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. Wow. So, I'm skipping quite a bit. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. Let's just read this short footnotes. The Assyrian commander, upon hearing that the army left to fight elsewhere, Sennacherib, sends a defiant, threatening letter to Hezekiah demanding surrender and boasting of destroying the gods of the other nations, the lowercase g's. So this defiant letter now follows all the smack talking over the city wall. And so next, verses 14 through 19, known as Hezekiah's prayer. This is where I wanted to get to. Hezekiah takes the letter to the temple. Imagine that. God knows what's written in there, but Hezekiah takes it to the temple, spreads it out before Yehovah, and prays for deliverance. He acknowledges God's sovereignty over all kingdoms and asks for salvation so the whole world will know that Yehovah alone is Elohim. This is powerful. Verse 14, and Hezekiah received the letter of the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up into the house of Yehovah and spread it before Yehovah. So he's in the temple again. And Hezekiah prayed before Yehovah and said, O Yehovah Elohim of Israel, which dwelleth between the cherubims, thou art the Elohim, even thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. Thou hast made heaven and earth. This is very proper. This is a very proper way to approach the throne of God in prayer. Verse 16. This is interesting to Papa John. Yehovah, bow down thine ear and hear. Open, Yehovah, thine eyes. Aren't we the ones that always told you have eyes to see and ears to hear? And here's the king saying to God, bow down thine ear and hear, and open thine eyes and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which hath sent him to reproach the living Elohim. Of a truth, Yehovah, the kings of Assyria have destroyed the nations and their lands. That's a fact. He's just saying, yeah, that's true. Verse 18, and have cast their Elohims, lowercase e's, into the fire. But then I love his response, for they were no Elohims, but the work of man's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they have destroyed them. I think I know where King Hezekiah is headed. Now therefore, O Yehovah, our Elohim, I beseech thee, and here's what he asked for, save thou us out of his hand. And then I not only underlined and bolded, I made it even a larger font size. That, and before we continue, this is the method of prayer that a stake patriarch years ago, Ron McIntyre, who gave most of my children their patriarchal blessings, which is a personal prophetic word spoken over a child from a brother who's been set apart as a patriarch to give you a message from God about your life and what may or may not happen depending on how you live. It's personal scripture. And those were some sacred moments in his home. And he's explained to us as a family that when you pray and you ask God for anything, you need to invoke the scriptural phrase after your request, that I may. I need this, this, and this. Father, would you do this, this, and this, that I may? And then fill in the blank to keep yourself honest and to encourage conversation with God so that you know what you're asking for is just and right and true. So if you say that I may and you have a vain reason, it exposes hopefully you have the eyes to realize and the ears to see in yourself, I'm being selfish, I'm being self-centered, I'm being whatever. But here's King Hezekiah. I beseech thee, save thou us out of his hand. And he's made it very clear whose hand he's talking about. That, and now he fills in the blank, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art Yehovah Elohim, even thou only. Wow. If you miss the power of that, it's okay. But at this point in my life, that is the most profound, unselfish prayer when you're begging for protection. He makes it all about God. Save us so that you can be made great in the eyes of the whole world like you did when you brought us out of Egypt. So next 20, verses 20 through 31, Isaiah prophecy, he explains the deliverance. Isaiah sends words to Hezekiah that God has heard his prayer. He delivers a mocking taunt to the Assyrian, affirming that it is actually the Holy One of Israel whom they have blasphemed. God promises to shield and defend Jerusalem for his own sake. Here we go. Listen to this. Then Isaiah, the son of Amoz, sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim of Israel, that which thou hast prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard. This is the word that Yahweh has spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, of Sion, hath despised thee, speaking to the Assyrian, and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem hath shaken her head at thee. And the reference to a daughter of Zion and the virgin is that they are true to the true and living God. And the birth of this nation is going to happen in divine ways. Isn't that a shadow picture of Christ and his mother? Beautiful. 22, whom thou hast reproached and blasphemed, and against whom thou hast exalted thy voice and lifted up thine eyes on high, even against the Holy One, the Kadosh of Israel. Kadosh means Holy One. The Hebrew word kadosh translates to holy, sacred, or set apart. Has not King Hezekiah done his best, all that's humanly possible, to set himself apart from the other nations? And you see the resistance he's up against. I can identify with that resistance in my own life on a smaller scale. I love this. Rooted in the concept of distinction signifies that it is separated from the ordinary or profane and dedicated to a higher and divine purpose. That's what I want to do with my life, and I'm hoping my children, my children's children, my future posterity, extended family and friends, that we all find a way to be set apart, more sacred. Not that we're better than anyone else, but just pick the divine over the culture and the debased trends that swirl around us. May God bless us with the empowering grace despite the wickedness that surrounds us, is Papa John's prayer. Verse 23, by thy messengers thou hast reproached the Adonai. It's a capital L, the Lord. This is a reference to the God of Israel. You have reproached Adonai and have said, with the multitude of my chariots I am come up to the heights of the mountains, to the sides of Lebanon, and will cut down the tall cedar trees thereof, and the choice fir trees thereof, and I will enter into the lodgings of his borders, and into the forest of his Carmel. I have digged and drunk strange waters, and with the sole of my feet have I dried up all the rivers of besieged places. Hast thou not heard long ago? This is God speaking, how I have done it, and of ancient times that I have formed it. We're talking about the creation here, the creation epic. He's the creator of all. Now have I brought it to pass that thou shouldest be to lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps. He's caused it to happen. He's allowed it up to this point. Therefore, their inhabitants were of small power. They were dismayed and confounded. They were as the grass of the field, and as the green herb, and as the grass on the housetop, and as corn. And in Hebrew, it would have as grain blasted before it's grown up. Verse 27, but I know thy abode. Wow, he knows, I know where you live. And thy going out and thy coming in, and thy rage against me. Wow, he's got your number. God knows. And verse 28, because thy raged against me and thy tumult, I can't even talk. The tumult is come up into mine ears. The ruckus is made it to God's ears. Therefore, I will put my hook in thy nose, and my bridle in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way by which thou camest. And this shall be a sign unto thee. Ye shall eat this year such things as grow of themselves. Oh, good. Your gardens, you're going to eat from that year's crop. And in the second year, that which springeth up of the same. Oh, so that's a year-old storage. Okay, not so good. And in the third year, sow and reap and plant vineyards and eat the fruit thereof. I'm not sure I understand that verse completely, but the point is you're not prospering. But verse 30, I think that we're now turning towards Judah. So on one hand, that's what's going to happen to Assyria. Verse 30, and the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah, of Yehudah, shall yet again take root downward and bear fruit upward. So they're going to be blessed and prospered. God promised he'd do that, right? For out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they shall escape out of Mount Zion, of Mount Sion. The zeal of Jehovah of hosts. So now God is invoking his own name, following it up with the phrase of hosts, which means God of armies. But it's Jehovah of armies shall do this. And that's just not man-made armies of human flesh, but angelic armies. So next we're going to read again God's vow as God continues to declare that the king of Assyria will not enter Jerusalem, nor will he shoot a single arrow into the city. Jehovah will defend the city for his own sake and for the sake of his servant David. Again, the prophetic line of prophecy and blessings, including the future Messiah. Verse 32, therefore, thus saith Jehovah concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into the city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor cast a bank against it. The bank is they'd build those earthen ramps and then breach their walls. He's not going to do it. They've done it in every previous siege and attack. Verse 33, by the way that he came, who? The king of Assyria, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into the city, saith who? Jehovah, saith Jehovah, for I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake, and all the associated prophecies and blessings. So the fall of Assyria now commences. That very night, guess what? An angel of Jehovah strikes down 185,000 men in the camp. And Sennacherib retreats to Nineveh, where he's later assassinated by his sons. And that's what we read about real fast. So here comes the angel, an image of the angel in the Assyrian camp. And it came to pass that night that the angel of Jehovah went out and smote the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. You do the math with the old English calculation, that's 185,000 dead Assyrian soldiers. And when they arose early in the morning, okay, so not everybody's dead. Behold, they were all dead corpses. They looked around. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh. And it came to pass as he worshipped in the house of Nisroch, his Elohim. So he has a pagan god that he worships too. That while he's worshiping his pagan god in the house built for that pagan god, that false god, Adramelech and Sharezer, his sons, smote him with the sword. He's assassinated by two of his sons, and they escaped into the land of Armenia. And then Esarhaddon, his son, a third son, reigned in his stead. Didn't God promise in the beginning, clear back at Mount Sinai, let me be your God, and please be my people, and if you are, I will fight your battles for you. You don't need to go into confederate. You don't need to have agreements with surrounding nations. I will protect you. And has he not kept that promise right here? And the king Hezekiah's fear of there's not strength to bring forth, well, just one of us and God makes us, well, we will always be blessed when we align ourselves with God. What do we learn again now, real fast? And then we're going to do one more chapter. Chapter 19 says, when facing impossible threats, this chapter teaches us that it teaches us to take our problems directly to God in prayer rather than relying on worldly alliances or panicking. King Hezekiah's wonderful response to the Assyrian siege, spreading the enemy's letter before God, acknowledging God's sovereignty, demonstrates how faith can turn dire situations into miraculous victories. Key takeaways from this chapter include take your burdens to God. When Hezekiah received the threatening letter from Sennacherib, he didn't just negotiate or call an ally, he took it to the temple and literally spread it out before God. I think this is a model of taking anxieties and crises directly to God that we could follow. May we learn from King Hezekiah's example here. The next thing we have been reminded of in this chapter is prayer driven by God's reputation. Is he not the true and living God? If you really know that and believe that, like King Hezekiah, his ultimate desire wasn't just to save his own skin, but that God would be glorified so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are Jehovah, our Elohim. Beautiful. May my prayers be much more like King Hezekiah's from now on. Seek godly counsel. Hezekiah immediately sent his letter to the prophet Isaiah for spiritual guidance. Sent his leaders and reassurance. So he wants spiritual guidance and reassurance. So for us, surrounding ourselves with wise, godly mentors during a crisis is essential. There's such value in that. And here's another truth. Do not fear arrogant boasting. Sennacherib mocked the living God, relying strictly on his own military might. This chapter shows us that no human force, no matter how intimidating, is greater than God. And my dad always said when I was young, Johnny, dogs don't bark at parked cars. Meaning if you're getting insults, made fun of, picked on, you're moving and shaking. You're getting something done, because a dog wouldn't notice you if you weren't passing by. They always bark at the car or the bicycle that's moving past fast. That was my dad's little ditty idiom that he would share with me to motivate me to not just have thick skin. And in my day, it was not a pampered age. Your best friend would look for a way to insult you, and you would laugh and try to figure out another way to insult back. And then we would still love each other and still be friends. It was just a tougher, we weren't afraid of insults. In this pampered age, the younger generation is not so used to that. Culture has kind of become less tolerant of, and my sweet mother, who just turned 90 a few weeks ago, she always appreciated positive humor, but not negative humor. And so she instilled in us a desire to not be insulting each other. But boy, we had a lot of that smack talking going on in this episode, didn't we? Two more insights, and then we'll get to chapter 20, and it'll be a brief review of chapter 20. God hears and acts. And that's basically the Hebrew word for Shema. God shemas. He hears and acts. He doesn't react. To believe is to Shema in the Hebrew mind. It's not a mental exercise. To believe is you heard it and then you act on it. It's now part of you. It's not a mental exercise. It's active faith. So Yehovah heard Hezekiah's prayer and dispatched an angel to destroy 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in a single night. God is attentive to the cries of his people and fights on their behalf. May it be so for each of us, is Papa John's prayer. The last thing that I just wanted to bring out that we gained from chapter 19, God's divine justice and sovereignty. Sennacherib was eventually assassinated by his own sons in the temple of his false god. It is a powerful reminder that God is sovereign over all secular rulers and human history. And one person and God is a majority, an all-powerful, victorious majority. And thankfully, it's not just one in God. Thankfully and hopefully, any of us that have made it this far into Papa John's episodes is on a path, a faith journey, and may we all reach out and support each other as we grow in understanding, faith, and in relationship with God. Chapter 20 of 2 Kings. Guess what? We find King Hezekiah on his deathbed. He's terminally ill. This is there's another pivotal diplomatic visit, though, that comes up in this chapter, this time from Babylon. And unfortunately, some negative things happen, but we're going to end on a high note with Hezekiah's tunnel. If you've never heard about it, you can actually go visit it in the nation of Israel today. So Hezekiah falls deathly ill. The prophet Isaiah arrives with a bleak message from God. Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Instead of resigning, Hezekiah turns his face to the wall in total solitude and passionately weeps while praying to God for mercy. And it's amazing. Verse 3, I beseech thee, O Yehovah, remember how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. And he's not, some people feel like you can't bind the Lord and it's improper to bind the Lord. Look what I did. Look what I did. The king is doing this. He knows where his source of strength is. But all these acts are evidence of his faith. And all I know, Papa John has learned that God honors those who honor him. And we shouldn't be so caught up with someone who's doing what's right, perhaps for the wrong reason. Maybe it feels like a checklist of dues to get to heaven. Eventually, if you're walking with God, we all come to realize we are totally dependent upon Him. Let's allow the journey and not be critical of each other. I beseech thee, O Yahweh, remember how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. And it came to pass afore, that's this interesting Old English word, afore Isaiah was gone out into the middle of the court. He hasn't even left the palace. The word of Yahweh came to him, saying, Turn again and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, Thus saith Yahweh, the Elohim of David, thy father, I have heard thy prayer. Wow, that was fast. Talk about the hotline. I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee. On the third day thou shalt go up into the house of Jehovah. So within 3 days he will be healed. And verse 6, and I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend the city for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. This reminds Papa John of a childhood friend who married, had a family, and 4 or 5 children, I believe. And then he got cancer. And he prayed to God, similar to King Hezekiah. And he says, Please, Father, heal me and help me live, extend my life so I can at least live to see my daughter get married. And God healed him. And years passed, and she grew up, and she got married. And his cancer returned. My friend had never forgotten. It had completely slipped my mind. But it came back quickly, and it was discussed at his funeral how God gave him the time he requested. This story is not fiction. We can access the same power. It's available to all of us, just like King Hezekiah. And he figured out how to access that power. Isaiah verse 7 said, Take a lump of figs, and they took and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, What shall be the sign that Yahweh will heal me? Oh, come on, King. King Hezekiah, you're demanding a sign. And sometimes God humors us, and he does. And thou shalt go up to the house of Yahweh the third day. So what's the sign? And Isaiah said, This sign shalt thou have, Yahweh, that Yahweh will do the thing that he hath spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or back 10 degrees? So there's talking about, when the sun comes up and the sun moves through the sky and goes down in the afternoon, we know which direction the shadows move. And so the prophet's given him a choice. Do you want to see the shadow move 10 degrees like it does every day? Or do you want it to move the opposite direction? Verse 10, and Hezekiah answered, Is it a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees? Nay, but let the shadow return backward 10 degrees. And somehow God does that. I don't know how. Verse 11, and Isaiah the prophet cried unto Jehovah, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backward, by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. Ahaz is his father. So there's some type of sundial, and the miracle and the sign that he will recover. Don't doubt the word of the prophet. I even honor your request for a sign. Hearing that Hezekiah was ill, it's amazing how fast the word travels. The king of Babylon sends messengers with letters and gifts, and Hezekiah, likely flattered and prideful, shows the envoy his entire armory and his royal treasures. And Papa John, I would just add, I hope he's just also weak in his recovery, because he's lacking judgment. So these Babylonians come, he shows them through the entire armory, his treasures, shows them everything. This is deja vu, right? Didn't King Solomon do this? Verse 14, then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. Verse 15, and he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Are you kidding? This is what Solomon made the mistake of doing when the queen of Sheba, the queen of the east, came. And he was foolish enough to show his greatness and how wealthy they were as a nation. And he was warned. And here it happens again. What is it with these kings? But again, Hezekiah's human weakness is exposed here. And we all have those weaknesses. We know what they are, don't we? Most of the time. And may God help us overcome our weaknesses. Isaiah confronts the king regarding the visitors. Hezekiah admits they saw everything in the house. Isaiah then next is going to deliver a sobering prophecy. The day will come when all the wealth of Hezekiah that he flaunted and all his descendants will be carried off into Babylon. Behold, the day come that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith Jehovah. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee. So he's talking about his posterity, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. And a eunuch, if you don't know, speaking to my younger children and grandchildren, a eunuch is a castrated male. When you're called into the palace of the king of Babylon, you get castrated. You're neutered. You're not going to have any children. And we see this prophecy fulfilled. And some of our favorite Bible characters. Have you ever heard of Meshach? Michael, Hananiah, and Azariah? We know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're Babylonian names. They were good Hebrew boys taken into captivity. They were made into eunuchs, yet they chose to serve. They weren't bitter. They weren't angry. They served the true and living God and were great examples of Israelites in captivity under the king Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. This is being prophesied right here from this one moment of weakness when he let his guard down. Unfortunate. It's interesting to Papa John that King Solomon made this mistake and now King Hezekiah makes the same mistake. Verse 19, then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, good is the word of Jehovah which thou hast spoken. So the king accepts this unfortunate prophecy and says, it is not good if peace and truth be in my days. So there's some guilt, there's some remorse and some regret. But as years go on, they're attacked again. The Assyrian army is coming back. And how are they going to defeat? And if you've never heard of Hezekiah's tunnel, it's an amazing, go online, Google it. There's so many stories. They dug a cave from both ends and met in the middle, moving the spring of the Gihon spring all the way to the pools of Siloam. And it used to irrigate the crops outside the city, the king's orchards and stuff. But King Hezekiah, inspired by God, knew that if we find a way and we block that water source and bring it inside the city, we can survive a siege longer than a few weeks or months. Because if you don't have a water source inside your city, you're in trouble. And it's an amazing engineering feat. They say that even today we would have a hard time, even with laser technology, to duplicate what they pulled off to reroute the water source for the city and fortify in preparation for that. Quite remarkable. Here's another video about it. I hope you take time. And if you ever make it to Israel, this is now at the top of Papa John's list. If I ever make that trip, I want to walk through. I've seen videos of people walking through, and it's got the perfect slope, a long tunnel. How in the world they did it and found each other, tapping method through the granite, who knows? But it's a remarkable, powerful story. And I love the fact that God always can. If we are just faithful to him, he will be faithful to us. And with that being said, the last sentence of this verse, of this chapter, and the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made a pool and a conduit and brought water into the city, are not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. But I went to the second book of Chronicles, chapter 32, and it's mentioned there in 3 verses. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem. He took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains and brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? The last verse, and Hezekiah slept with his fathers, a polite way of saying he passes away, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. So what did we learn? Again, the power of sincere prayer, the danger of arrogance, and long-term consequences of poor choices. Again, Hezekiah knew better. It's unfortunate, but it's lessons we can learn. And may we do better in our lives, and may we measure up to his better qualities. We all have our better angels, and we all have the natural man and woman inside of us. May we choose the better angels of our strengths, and may we follow the God of Abraham. May he bless us in our efforts, is my prayer. Thank you again for joining me for this episode, and I look forward to talking to all of you again very soon.